Okay, and we're live. There it is.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to the second MCU recap live stream. Last week, we covered the entire project, what we hope to achieve, and have we just received me? Hold on.
What?
I'm getting an echo. There we go, fixed it. Nice.
Success.
I forgot to mute the other tab. We're fine. So, hello and welcome to the second MCU live stream. Last week we covered the first Iron Man film and the Incredible Hulk, and this week we're going to cover the first Thor movie and Iron Man 2. Just as a recap, this project is in the lead up to Infinity War. We're going back, rewatching all the old films, building the hype, and sort of analysing them, how good the films were and the effects that they've had, and coming together a puzzle of everything, the MCU as it is. So, James might be here at some point, but until he arrives, we have our lovely co-host, Ibby. Do a bit of an intro, Ibby.
Hello. I'm just here. I have nothing to say, Greg. This doesn't work.
Who are you?
I'm just
what do
here.
you do?
I make YouTube videos. So many. Yeah.
Oh, loads. Do you post them?
Oh, I heard myself. Yes, I do. They're all up on my channel. You can see them right now. You should subscribe.
Oh, wonderful. I'll be sure to put everything in the description.
Yeah.
So, of the two films, Thor and Iron Man 2, which would you say is your favourite?
Is that even a question? It's obviously Thor.
Obviously Thor.
Yeah.
So should we begin with that one then?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm happy to begin there.
So do you want to give like a brief overview of that film? Like plot, synopsis, etc.?
Okay, so in this film, basically, we're on Asgard, where there's a lot of strange choices made in terms of design, but we'll come back to that. Basically, Thor is like this brash young guy. He's about to become king. His brother, Loki, is kind of like, well, you'll be probably a shit king and probably burn our house to the ground. And it's really sad. So basically, Loki manipulates a whole bunch of events to happen and just kind of messes up his own life in the process. And Thor gets exiled to Earth by his father, played by Anthony Hopkins, very, very well. And he meets some humans who kind of, just has some shenanigans on Earth. His brother tries to kill him a bit.
Just a little bit.
It's a fun day out, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a nice few days of just exile and
it's
a really good punishment. Yeah, they also speak in a very Shakespearean way.
Yeah.
And then he comes back to Asgard. He gets his hammer back. Oh, he has a hammer. He loses that. I forgot to say. Because he's the god of thunder. There you go. I'm not very with it this morning. I've not had my coffee. It's afternoon, isn't it? Whoops. Anyway, he comes back to Asgard and he and his brother face off, and then Loki just kind of commits suicide / goes, I'm out, and leaves.
Yeah, that's a fairly decent overview.
Yeah.
So, interestingly enough, this was the third, no, actually, it was the fourth MCU film, because Iron Man 2 came before it. And so, up until that point, we'd had the two Iron Man films and the Hulk, and now suddenly, Asgard.
Yeah, we're going a completely different direction with this movie, but
we've
not
still got a lot of
enough.
it taking place there. But yeah, it's pretty crazy, especially because we have just like self-made scientific heroes, and then suddenly you got a big old God of Thunder boy.
Yeah.
An alien with magic powers, and then what do you think like an effect on the MCU that aspect of the movie had?
Okay, for me, this movie really like blows out the MCU universe. So it expands massively with this film. Just in terms of like suddenly Asgard is kind of the 9 realms and stuff as an empire, and so automatically that opens up a whole bunch of worlds to us, and we directly visit two of these planets too, and we get to see aliens, and it's a very, very different movie to the others in terms of Thor as a king, whereas Tony Stark is a billionaire, but everything he does he builds for himself, he inherits stuff from his father, but it's different. But Thor is like, he's born as part of this, and it's a very, very different movie. But okay, I have some hang-ups about this film.
Ooh.
And I suppose, can we go into that if we talk about comics in a minute?
Sure.
Okay, I'll hold off on that.
You can lead this this part of the discussion.
Okay. So, in terms of the comics, this movie is very, very different from the comic book setting of Asgard, and like how they've characterized a lot of characters as well. Frigga, their mother, is in the comics. She is like queen. She's very angry a lot of the time. You know, she's very stern. She's a lot like her husband. And Odin is a lot more of a kind of drunkard as per mythology. But in the comics, Asgard is a lot more fantastical, and there's a lot of differences. And I think they deliberately tried to make Thor's family and just like the general Asgardian outlook on life as similar to Earth as possible, so that you could suspend your disbelief about it, because it is, having aliens is so different to the other movies, which don't, I mean, you do have monsters, but it's not like a whole other species of intelligent beings, whereas this one is. And so I understand why they had to do all the Earth segments in this film, but I would have preferred it if they'd have taken it in an entirely different direction. Or at least, I suppose this one is fine. I like this one. This one, the Earth stuff works. The second one, the Earth stuff does not work and needed to go. So there are some issues in terms of characters I wouldn't have bothered to continue with, really. But yeah, this movie's good. It's nice.
Right. So talking about the Earth stuff, obviously, sort of kind of partway into the film, Thor is stripped of his powers and he gets just sent to Earth, and we properly get to know the Earth-based characters. Do you want to talk a little bit about those characters and how they interact with each other?
Let's. Okay, so shall we start with Jane?
Yeah, that'd be a really good starting point.
Feminist narrative here. Okay, so Jane is, for me, significantly better as like a female sidekick than Betty, as we discussed in the last hangout, who was just not good generally. Jane does seem to have a lot more character, which works. However, and we actually see her doing science things, which is always a bonus. More generally, though, I'm not a fan of rushed romance stories, like in terms of like knowing each other for 3 days and suddenly they're in love. No, I don't like it. And I don't like romance additions to these films because I find them very boring. But I don't mind Jane in this movie. She's fine. Yeah. Natalie Portman's performance is fine.
Especially because you say comparing things to the comics. So the big difference here is I've forgotten his name. The
Selvig?
No, the fake name that Thor takes.
Oh, Donald Blake.
Donald Blake, thank you. In the comics, of course, he is Donald Blake. Donald Blake is a person, a human on Earth, who Thor sort of inhabits the body of, and they sort of switch around. And so that gives a reason for Jane Foster to be sort of connected with him. And it leads to actual like character interaction and world building. But because they decided to do away with that, it kind of leaves Jane in a bit of a rough spot.
Yeah, for me, this movie could have worked better if they'd made Thor lose his memories upon coming to Earth. Yeah. However, at the same time, that would be less dramatic, and obviously the films tend to take place in like a short span of time. So having, you know, an action movie where the guy has to spend his whole time finding out his identity and stuff, I feel like that would have, because there is a lot going on Asgard at the same time. And so I would argue this is much Loki's movie as Thor's. If they'd have had Thor having to go and find himself again, that just wouldn't fit into like a 3-day time span. So, but at the same time, I can envision that movie working like really well in terms of like, if you think about other identity movies involving action that I do not remember off the top of my head. There's a good one with Tom Cruise, I think, that people liked. I don't know.
Tom Cruise has done movies.
Yeah.
So
also, I don't like that. Oh, sorry. In terms of more characters, these aren't Earth ones, but the Warriors 3 and Sif are really sidelined in this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
like in the comics they have so much character, and it's such a shame in terms of like what we miss out on with them. And I don't know, I feel like I don't know how I would have done it differently, but I really feel like if they hadn't have done away with the Donald Blake stuff, and if you could have given the movie a longer time span in some way, I mean, you'd have to edit things that were going on in Asgard and Jotunheim as well. But I feel like they could have had more of a role if they were helping Thor remember who he is.
Yeah.
Whereas
I feel that his origin story is difficult because it primarily doesn't work in. So there are two Thors, basically. There's the classic comics Thor, where he was a superhero with a secret identity and he was just on Earth all the time. And then there's Asgard Thor, which is what we currently have in the comics, where he's just going around being the Odin son and having a good time. And that's where the Warriors 3 and Lady Sif really come into things, when it feels more like Lord of the Rings in space. But on Earth, the supporting cast, you've got two supporting casts and one of them gets sidelines.
See, okay. In terms of this movie, I've already said that I see it as very much like a Thor and Loki movie, in that there's like two very distinct and intertwined narratives going on. The reason I feel like the Warriors 3 don't work is because they're there as in opposition to Loki, whereas like the Earth supporting cast are also all around Thor, and they are like supporting him as well. So for me, if you had the Warriors 3 on Earth supporting Thor, or going to Earth and crossing over, and then you had separate people, I don't know, I feel like it's just too... There's something about it doesn't work in terms of having the Warriors 3 and having the Earth cast as well.
We see...
You can't develop them all enough.
There's a couple of comments here from Emma, which say, so we'll go with the most recent one, which is the Warriors 3 are also better, so shouldn't have been sidelined, ?
Yeah, I agree. In terms of the comics, like, I personally don't like Jane in the comics. I only like her in the new run of Mighty Thor, which is really good. And that's what sold me on her character. But in a lot of the other, like, earlier comics, she's not a great character.
Absolutely.
And she's only really involved because of the Donald Blake storyline.
And that's the problem I see, which is...
There's too much going on in this movie. Too short.
If they'd have wanted to focus on the Warriors 3 and on Asgard, they would have then had to remove essentially the origin story, which is what I'm saying it doesn't work. Because his origin story of being sent to Earth and having to rediscover his worthiness, King Arthur style, is it really works with Donald Blake. And you'd have to set pretty much the entire movie on Earth, which is what they did back in those comics. But now in the comics, when it's more fantasy style, when the Warriors 3 are more important, we see it would have been a better story to tell as an origin story of like him earning the hammer, so setting it back in time when he was younger. But then
in terms of chronology of the MCU, that doesn't work.
And we also couldn't have had the Avengers.
And the Avengers is such a good movie.
So it's difficult. Thor had to be... There's no good way to do Thor, which is annoying.
There's no way, unless you made it like a 4-hour movie, which I would sit there and watch, I'm just saying, quite happily. I feel like that's the only way you could really do it all together, unless you've done 2 Thor movies before the Avengers.
There is the interesting angle of, because they did change Jane's character to be the scientist instead of the paramedic, which she is traditionally. And having her be a paramedic makes her sort of more of an active character, especially with regard to fight scenes. And it, again, you know how we were talking about how certain characters have a reason to be in danger. So if you talk about DC, like Lois Lane, she's always in danger because she's reporting on it. Having Jane be a paramedic puts her in the line of fire. Which is much better than just what we saw with Betty, which is you're in danger because...
But why?
So that's interesting. It makes her a far more active character, but then it removes the tie to like the whole magic and science are the same thing narrative that they were running through this film.
That is also not true. In terms of like where the fucking everything goes in the MCU, that's proven not to be true.
Yeah.
Like, you watch the second Thor movie, that's not true at all. What?
Yeah. It's really interesting, because at this point they were trying to do a Thor movie that was grounded, because they didn't have full faith in the more comic book aspects.
That was my point, is like, I understand why this movie had to be how it is.
Yeah.
There is like, given its positioning within the MCU, there's no other way they could have done this. But at the same time, it's just kind of disappointing, especially now having, like, I loved this movie when I hadn't read the comics, but having now read comics, I'm like, what have you done to my kids?
Yeah.
And there's so much opportunity. Like, Thor has a massive family, and like, you know, there's so many other people we could have just had like a completely detached drama set on Asgard involving Thor owning his hammer.
Yeah.
And like, you could have had other people like Boulder there. Everyone forgets about Boulder.
Boulder has never been in the movies.
Oh, Boulder.
The trilogy is done now, and Boulder hasn't shown up.
Did we just presume he doesn't exist? Did Loki already kill him? did Loki kill him and no one cared?
I guess.
I mean, that is what happened in the comics.
Yeah, that's true.
Only his mother cared. And Thor was just like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So let's return to the Earth-based supporting cast.
Yes.
So we talked a bit about Jane. What about Darcy? Okay,
the first time I saw this movie, I liked Darcy. Second time, she becomes annoying. Like, I don't think she's necessary. Like, right. She's just like an intern, but then you already have Eric Selvig as like, they have a weird dynamic, the three of them, where I can't tell who's useful and who isn't, but it just comes out that they're all kind of pointless.
It's interesting, because he sort of went on to be a bit more useful.
Yeah, but okay. How they're all like intertwined in each other's lives is just confusing to me. Like, the first time I watched it, I thought he was Jane's dad, and then it turns out he's a friend of her dad.
Right.
It's just, what is he doing there? So it could have she could have been his assistant, and Darcy wouldn't be necessary. And I feel like this movie could use a chopping of some characters in a way to make other characters stand out more, like the Warriors 3 and Sif.
Yeah.
So if you Emma loves Darcy. Sorry, Emma. But if you chopped like Darcy, and who else would you chop? I don't know. I guess Darcy is fine.
Yeah. The thing is, the argument is that Jane Foster provides education for Thor, and also a connection to Earth, just like Superman has Lois Lane.
Mm-hmm. Every time you mention Lois Lane, I get progressively more annoyed. Stop mentioning her. I have issues.
Yeah. Stop. I mean, they're fairly decent parallels, but yeah, and then the argument becomes, well, is that actually necessary? Do we even need Jane Foster at all?
Well, okay, for me, because Donald Blake isn't discovering like he's Thor, she doesn't really have a purpose in this version of the MCU either, which is why I think they chopped her in like Avengers, and she's just. When we talk about Thor 2, we will talk about how that movie was originally going to go.
Yeah.
But
so what about Natalie Portman's acting?
Bad. I mean, it's just okay. It's not bad. It's just she does not give me anything really.
Yeah.
Like, she just doesn't. She doesn't seem into him. They don't have any chemistry, which is why people ship other things from this movie.
Yeah.
But she's just not. I think it's because I've said before how much I like comedy, and as Emma is pointing out, they could mix Darcy and Jane together. That would be funny. But for me, the Thor we're presented with at the start of the movie is not someone who would fall for Jane, because Jane is boring, and Thor is like this kind of guy who's like into excess, and they should have taken that further as well. They just went so many things with halfway. But yeah, I understand that he does need a connection to Earth. Sorry, what was the original question? I started in on Jane again.
Natalie Portman's acting, but it
Not
also ties into
fine.
Yeah, we can also talk about Thor's connection to Earth and how
Mhm.
he cares for Midgard, and
Yes.
Jane is like, and this is why I'm bringing up Lois Lane time and time again, because it very, very distinctly mirrors Superman protecting Earth but caring for Lois, and Thor protects Midgard but cares for Jane.
Mhm.
And Jane serves as like the anchor point to make him realize how worthwhile humans are. And I'm wondering whether or not that's a bit outdated.
To me, that is a narrative that is very common in terms of like sci-fi movies.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the heroes, they are all very self-obsessed, and then they meet this one person from another race that makes them realize that these people are not all boring or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is again playing into this whole thing about being exceptional, and like Jane is just not interesting in any way that sells for me. But
because something I think is interesting.
They could. Okay, so Emma is saying in the comments, why would he care for Earth at all? In an alternative reality, where we do have this Donald Blake thing going on in a better way, he can learn to care for Earth during that. And this works better because he will interact with many people and it'll all be nice. Just, this movie makes me so sad. But also, I understand, 100% why it is like it is. But
now, what's interesting is with the Lady Sif, if we see them start to develop romance, then she can function as like his anchor point back to Asgard, and she can provide tension by essentially saying, why are you going to Midgard? Your people are here, you love me, etc., etc. And I just think that's an interesting avenue they could have gone down. Then it could have turned into like love triangle territory.
Love triangles are the worst thing in the universe.
Exactly. So,
but it could have. I feel like it could have worked here.
Yeah.
Or if we've been given the impression, I feel like they do a bit of half-heartedness in terms of Sif, in that they kind of imply that they have a history, but then also don't. And I'm just like, okay, so do they have history in this universe or do they not? Like, I wouldn't really want her as a love interest.
We don't have her as a character, I feel.
No. She's just there.
Yeah. Emma does say that not every woman has to be a love interest, which is entirely fair, which is why I think if I was to retroactively rework this film, I would have more of the Donald Blake stuff, not have the really weird, complex switching places thing that they had.
No.
But just have him lose his memories and take the Donald Blake persona, and then have him interact with Jane, Darcy, Eric, maybe someone else, but not fall in love with any of them. Just see the worth in them, because he considers himself human. And then have Sif be the love interest.
Okay, for me, I would do all of that, and I would have him kind of realize that humans are worthy. You know what I mean? Because he's trying to find out that he is worthy.
Yeah.
But have him work out that that they are worthy of his protection as well, and of Asgard's protection. And then have Sif be like part of his tie back to home, but not in a romantic way. I prefer them as friends. Like where they're at in the comics at the minute is a really good place. And yeah, I just prefer. Also, Sif is like secretly a lesbian, so just saying.
I think it would have been interesting to play up her role in the society of Asgard a little bit more, because I genuinely can't remember what she is in the comics, but I think it would have been interesting to have her be essentially the leader of the military.
Yeah, she's the leader of the Valkyries in the comics.
Oh, is she? Well, that's cool.
I think at some point, yeah.
Because it could have led to a role in Black Panther. We see Daniel Kaluuya's character, who's Mkabi, I think his name is, and he's the leader of the military, and he sort of says to Black Panther, why are you caring about other people? Your people are here. And she could have filled a similar role.
Yeah.
If they'd have played up who she was, because the Warriors 3, sure, they're just like a ragtag bunch of merry men.
fucking love the Warriors Three.
And like
So
they're cool. They're just like celebrities in Asgard.
yeah.
But Lady Sif, if she's like the leader of the Valkyries or the military or something, could have led to a lot of interesting dynamics with Thor.
In terms of where we are at in the comics at the minute, like, you know, Asgard currently, where I'm up to at least, has the All Mother in charge, and all three of them are dressed in fucking armor all the time. All of the women in Asgard are like armored, whereas in this movie it is implied that Sif is like some kind of exception, whereas in the comics everyone is like, you know, it is very much like Vikings in space. Everyone can fight and everyone will fight, and like, you know, I'm not sure why. This is again goes into my problem with Frigga in this movie, is I don't like it either. I mean, I do like, in terms of there is an interview with Tom Hiddleston where he talks about how he and the actress who played Frigga did like have like a whole session together where they worked out how to do like physical things, like ticks and stuff. So they both do their hands folded in the same way and stuff. That's like that, cool. Which is really interesting. But I don't like her in this movie because I don't understand why, like, she's not like that, and I don't understand why they've tried to give. I feel like they've tried very hard to give like the perfect like American family into Asgard, and so we have like the patriarch, we have the woman who like does the cooking, does the cleaning, dresses in this really feminine way. Then we have the out of control older son and the out of control younger son, and in that like you have two children, and there's no room for any of the rest of the family or like more of the dynamics of Asgard, because this becomes not a family drama, but I wouldn't say I don't know how to describe it, but it's just
it's very Shakespearean, and intentionally so. I mean, they did have Kenneth Branagh as the director, and he is very well known for doing Shakespeare. And we definitely see that a lot with their styles of speech, with the way it's done.
Why do they speak like that? They're Vikings, not from 16th century England. Who did fucking Kenneth Branagh?
Blame.
And then everyone got mad when that happened, when that was taken away in the third movie. I was like,
yeah, right.
It shouldn't be talking like that anyway.
Yeah, I genuinely can't remember which writer back in the day set them speaking in that way. But it's just peculiar. But something interesting that does happen a lot in this movie is the way it's shot just isn't that good. There's some decent set pieces and decent camera stuff, but if you go back and rewatch this movie, looking out for Dutch angles, you'll find too many. So to give a brief explanation for anyone, a Dutch angle is where you film something diagonal, basically, just really off kilter. It doesn't look natural. Nobody will ever see the world in that way. And the reason you would do it is to throw off your audience and make them think, oh, something's not right here. But there are so many Dutch angles in this movie. The moment
you said that, I've pictured like 3 of them.
Yeah. There's one of them used during the crowning ceremony for Thor.
Why?
When he goes up wearing the cool helmet, which he's never worn again, which I'm mad about because it was really cool.
That was a great helmet.
Such a good helmet. They just filmed it weirdly, and I'm like, why?
Okay,
this is a good moment.
Yeah, I agree. It's shot in a strange way, which I don't like. I just like someone to redo this movie. Can we just...
Like Wakanda, Asgard is a completely separate culture to the rest of Earth. It seems odd to me that the culture of Asgard is much less respected and nuanced in Thor than Wakanda in Black Panther.
Yes.
It's interesting because we see in Thor 2, not to go too much into that, they delve a bit more into the culture, but go on.
Oh, I wish this wasn't true, but again, this is just to do with the placing within the MCU. Like, it's too early for them to... they're not going to do a whole nuanced culture in space, because they're... I feel like this movie, it was a risk anyway.
Yeah.
So again, they didn't take it far enough, in the same way that they didn't take the Incredible Hulk far enough. Whereas now they're more into their stride. They're willing to go the whole way with things. because Asgard is just a completely different world with completely different values, but apparently that translates to speaking in a Shakespearean accent and being moderately sexist. So, which that's not how it is.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we don't really explore the Nine Realms all that much.
No, tragedy, honestly.
Yeah. Because
Although I do like where we're going for free, where they're like, oh yeah, it's an empire, and I was like, yes, they should have established that in the first movie because it's not clear whether the Nine Realms are different universes.
Yeah.
Because I've heard there were so many theories in the lead up to this, like, what do they constitute within this universe?
Yeah, and Yggdrasil, the World Tree, they never give an explanation for what that is.
Thor just draws it and he makes it seem like it's not a real thing, but it is like another plane of reality within our own universe, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah.
Because literally Loki fucking walks down it.
Yeah. Like, it's just a thing that has, like, spiritual energy stuff. It's weird.
He makes it sound like a religion, but then he's supposed to be explaining magic. That whole scene is whacked. Just, I can't cope with that scene.
Yeah. So, we've got comments. I think they should have established Asgard, Earth, and Thor 1 as they did, and then established the Nine Realms in Thor 2. Mm-hmm. So this first movie needed a certain level of simplicity.
Yeah, 100%. Again, we will talk about Thor 2 later on and the many problems of that movie. Oh dear. That is definitely probably the worst one, I would say, by a shot. And I do watch it repeatedly though. Because I really enjoy it. Like the Asgard scenes are really strong.
Yeah.
But the Earth stuff is really shit.
The Dark World is a really interesting one because it's, of the two, prior to Ragnarok, it's the worst, but I enjoy watching it the most.
Yeah. I really enjoy the Asgard scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really good. What else is there to talk about this movie?
I mean, we can talk about Loki, but I think we should save him for a little bit. Do you want to talk about the Destroyer?
Oh, God. Okay. So, this is not established how it works whatsoever. Like, it seems to work in two very different ways. Because in the comics, it is telepathically controlled. So, presumably, you have to be magic to do so.
Yeah.
Whereas at the start, it acts independently of Odin. So, presumably it's under some kind of imperative to just, destroy things that are in the way, I guess.
Yeah, like it's a god
intruders. Yeah. But then Loki just sends it to Earth, and I'm not entirely convinced on that. It's like, okay, I feel like that scene is put in there just so Thor can get his hammer back and go back to Asgard, have it out with him, so they can have their one-on-one fight. Yeah. It's literally just there for the purpose of having like an epic fight before they have like their little one. And I don't think it's necessary as a scene. Again, like this is something I would cut. And also, it's a huge abuser of very, very ugly shots. So.
Oh, absolutely. Like I really, really like that scene. Purely because I'm a big fan of fight scenes. Mm-hmm. But narratively, it doesn't make much sense. As you said, it's shot really ugly. And the only thing it's worth is we get to see the Destroyer look quite nice. Like the design and the CGI is really good. And there's that one shot of Thor actually like suiting up and then destroying it. That's
so nice.
The payoff to that is really good, I think. And we would have had that if he'd have just Sword in the Stone style picked it up. Let's talk about Sword in the Stone, actually, because Mjolnir, throughout the entire first half of the movie, is just
in the stone. Yeah.
So
what the fuck is S.H.I.E.L.D. doing in this movie? They're not even doing anything. No one is like performing tests on it. Loki just fucking walks in there. Hawkeye's just there for no reason.
Oh my god, Hawkeye. Talk about Hawkeye.
I love Hawkeye, but like Clint Barnes as Hawkeye in these movies is just so weird.
Yeah, because interestingly enough, Iron Man 2 and Thor were the movies where Natasha and Clint were first
Mm,
introduced.
yeah.
And so I think that was quite interesting that they were trying to worm these non-super hero characters
Mhm.
in. These two
Like,
Shield agents who are just exceptional, but not deserving of a full movie of their own at this point.
he's completely unnecessary in this movie, though. He's
Yeah,
so
that's the problem.
forgettable. He's not
Natasha
there
is
for
woven
long.
into the narrative, and Clint is just there.
I'm still thinking about how you would rejig this movie, and
Yeah,
I feel like in a world where Mjolnir is not discovered by Shield, or like maybe Clint is just sent to investigate by himself.
yeah,
Possibly this could work as like part of the Donald Blake narrative, and that could work. And he would be more enmeshed into the narrative that way. And you know, they could form a friendship.
yeah. If we had
That would be really good
like a
in terms of
direct
the
mirror to
Avengers.
Natasha. Yeah.
Yeah, because then
Um,
he'd be like, "Oh my god, my brother has just stolen my Earth pal,"
yeah,
as opposed to
exactly.
some old man I met one time.
um, yeah, and there's a pretty cool shot where we see Clint be like called in to snipe Thor,
Mhm.
and then he goes for the sniper rifle, and then like he's like, "Now I'm going to go for the bow." Like that's pretty decent, but being that that's all we see of him.
Mm. Yeah, I
mm,
forgot he was in this movie.
yeah. Speaking of forgetting people in the movie, Emma says that
Odin.
she forgot about Odin.
Odin does fuck all. He's the
Odin
worst
goes
dad
into the
ever.
Odin sleep. To be fair,
Oh, I follow this Tumblr that's like Odin suggestions, and it's like take a nap to avoid your sons. Mood.
yeah,
Oh, he's just. I feel like they've drawn. Okay, have you seen American Gods? Because the
I
Odin in
haven't.
that is much more believable to me than this Odin.
Right.
The Odin from that is very, very drawn on Norse mythology. It's Neil Gaiman, and he's like a big Norse mythology studier. I have several of his books, and Odin in this movie is just a very strange, like humanized version of the comics. Whereas,
Yeah.
like, you see him kind of scream at Loki, which is like very comic book of him because Odin in the comics screams
Oh,
all the
yeah.
time. Honestly, the mood. But
Anthony Hopkins was good
Anthony
because he's
Hopkins'
just
performance is good. But his
um
character makes no sense in this movie. Like, who the
yeah.
fuck goes no to your son who's fucking hanging off him? Oh,
Yeah.
such shitty parenting.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not good, is it?
Interestingly enough, the reason Emma says she doesn't remember him is that with his entire character arc over the trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't one.
Yeah.
Like in the
Yeah.
first one, he's in the Odin sleep. Fine, that's like a necessary thing.
Taking a nap to avoid his son.
Yeah, and also it sets up the concept of Odin
Mm.
and the concept of the king of Asgard as opposed to the god of whatever.
Uh-huh.
And then in the second movie, he's there, I think,
Yeah.
and then in Ragnarok, he dies.
I feel like the Odin sleep is a part of him recharging, isn't it?
Yeah,
So he like basically, he's regaining all his powers that apparently went away when he got shouted at by his son.
yeah, basically.
But we never see the payoff from that. I
Yeah.
feel like if during Thor and Loki's fight, he had like turned up and intervened and stopped them, like that would be to me
Because we do
more of a
see,
payoff. Because whereas he just kind of goes, "Oh, I'm late, better just catch my son's foot."
yeah, and in the opening fight scene, which is really nice on the Frost Giants world, we do see him turn up riding Sleipnir.
Oh my god, riding your grandson.
Yeah, but
This
like that's
movie
really
is so
cool.
weird.
Oh god, the family tree. But it's a really cool shot to see Odin turn up and be like, "Yo, dickheads,
Yeah.
stop this. I'm the king," and you start to see like the impressive man. But then we never see the Odin force.
Yeah, exactly. That's my thing, is we never see any of his power whatsoever in action. And
Yeah.
oh,
And it
is
like
that just so it doesn't diminish Thor? Or?
in the dark world. Not to delve into that one too much, but where was he?
He's just there to go, no, you can't date a human.
And then like
And then he's like, oh yeah, kill my sons. We're just like, Odin, what are you doing? I mean, that is a very comic book Odin thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're differing on how on between two entirely different characters.
Yeah.
So you have like him as a king, and then you just have him as like the shitty god.
Yeah.
And
then it never pays off because there's the whole thing about Thor eventually becoming king, and that's like a big weight on his shoulders that he doesn't want. But then we never see much of Odin being not only king of Asgard, but king of the gods. And it ties into the Odin Force, because the idea that you not only inherit the kingdom, you inherit the Force.
Yeah, that's never mentioned either.
Yeah, because the implication now in this Infinity War world is that Thor now, as the king of Asgard, has the Thor Force.
Yeah, but that's not mentioned properly either.
No, I doubt they're going to do anything with it. But it would have been really cool because he's lost his hammer, he's gained his full lightning powers. It would have been cool to see him wield at least some omnipotence.
Yeah. Oh, there's okay. Also, I'm convinced this movie would work really well as a mockumentary.
Oh my
god!
God.
That would get Taika Waititi to come and redirect this as a mockumentary.
Right.
I've seen so many posts around that, like, imagine a Greek gods mockumentary. Yeah, imagine a Thor mockumentary. How fucking hilarious would that be? Sorry, that just came into my head.
Yeah.
But yes, I 100% agree that this movie is just differing between two different things, and it's not going enough one way or the other. And I feel like that should just pay off. That pays off for like the regular viewers who are not really engaged, but like watching it in terms of like its implications, it's just not good.
Yeah. So let's talk about implications. How does this movie set up Avengers 1?
Well, does it? I mean, yeah, it does, but like in a very basic way.
Right.
Oh, my brother just tried to commit suicide.
So we're introduced to Loki, and we can't ignore how good Loki is.
Oh, Loki is such a good villain.
Right.
We've not talked about villains in this movie, but this is like... What I do like about this movie is we're not clear on who is the villain. And that makes a really interesting dynamic, because you can argue that like Laufey is the villain, Odin is the villain, Loki is the villain. What is going on here?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different dynamics going on, which I do really appreciate. But again, none of them are fulfilled to potential, because we don't see Loki going, "Oh, you're my dad," to Laufey, do you really?
No, we never see.
And Laufey and Odin don't face off in any meaningful way.
And keep in mind that they went to war.
Yeah.
Shortly before this movie takes place, because like Loki was stolen as a child, and then interestingly enough, we see that one scene where he like starts to turn blue.
Yeah. And then that's never mentioned in the MCU ever again. You
know what would be really cool is if Loki finally gave in to his frost giantness and just turned blue, and it was like that would be, because I'm a big fan of visually showing power development. So like when Tony Stark builds a new suit, it's the easiest way of showing he looks different, therefore he's more powerful.
Yeah.
And Captain America going from the triangular shield to the round one, etc., etc. And so to have Loki, like, do you remember Jessica Jones when Kilgrave goes a bit more purple?
Yeah.
Imagine if we'd have had that, but with frost giant Loki.
I would have I mean, I wasn't expecting to see Loki blue in the first Thor movie, but I would have liked to have seen him blue at some point afterwards. And also, again, I feel like they've kind of... the frost giant design is also not great in these movies.
Yeah, that's true.
But I feel like I would really like to see him blue again in Infinity War.
Yeah.
But I don't think that will happen.
Absolutely not.
Also, he's got a really shit costume on in Infinity War in that promotional picture, and I'm not happy.
I'm not a big fan of his Ragnarok costume, like, at all.
No.
It's
I don't like
not
the one
green.
No, why is he wearing a different colour? Honestly.
That's like basic character design that they're doing really well for every character.
He's not washed his hair since Thor 1. Someone do something for this child, honestly.
Honestly, right. Speaking of
help.
hair, should we talk about Thor?
Let's talk about Thor. Thor's wig in this movie, not good. So upsettingly bad.
It's like
general character design in this movie, not good.
No.
Although
honestly,
Loki's design is fine. Like I like his outfit in Jotunheim. I like the little waist thing. He's like cinched in. I'm like, oh, so many missed opportunities in this movie for Lady Loki as well.
Oh right, honestly.
They should have just flipped halfway through and not mentioned it. But I guess like, oh, because they've made Asgard such a patriarchal society. Okay. I can see why they didn't do that. But
so Thor's wig, like, because he's a Viking, they want to give him Viking hair, and they instead just gave him a really nice just hair.
It's just not that great of a wig though.
No, it's not a great wig, but like in terms of hairstyle, it's just like Fabio.
Yeah.
He's just fashionable.
It just looks like he's like going to surf or something.
Yeah.
I look at him and I'm like, oh, you're going down to the beach. Yeah. That's not Dr. Donald Blake, is it, either? No. Who is this man?
Madness.
Surfer dude.
And then they gave him that really good wig for Thor 2 and Avengers 2. With like the tiny braid crown thing.
The braid with his brother's hair in. Iconic.
Yeah, exactly.
When did he cut that off?
Oh, like...
The real questions? Hang on, Jane, I'm just cutting my brother's hair.
Yeah. But, and again, I'm going to bring it back to the helmet.
Why he should have worn that. Helmet appear on his head when he transforms?
He should have worn the helmet.
I love the helmet.
It's not even a mask. Because the argument is you don't give your characters a mask because you want the actor's face to be shown. Which is why Spider-Man takes his mask off so many times. Which is why in the new Black Panther movie, they had him have the removable mask.
I actually really liked that.
Yeah, it's really good. But the helmet is a helmet?
It's a hat.
And it looks nice.
And also it covered up that really bad, like, weird side parting they had going on.
Yeah.
That was not good.
What the helmet works really well for is this is in any time, any, like, cartoon or anything aimed at, like, teenage boys, you'll see this over and over again.
Yeah.
The characters are wearing some kind of armor. Midway through the fight, the armor breaks, and then like the drama is increased.
Yeah.
If we see it in Hulk versus Thor in Thor Ragnarok. Thor wears the helmet, the Hulk beats him up,
knocked off.
And the helmet gets knocked off, and that's when you know that it's serious.
Oh, that could have been like cinematic parallels as well.
Yeah. It's a really big missed opportunity to not have the helmet, basically, because we see it with Tony Stark. Anytime he's in a fight in the earlier films, anytime the suit gets damaged, is like, oh, the drama's just increased. Captain America, he loses the helmet in the Avengers movie, etc., etc., etc.
This movie is good, but it's not great, and and also narratively, I also want to talk about.
Go on.
Okay, so basically, I've said already that we have a dual narrative going on, but then the Destroyer comes to Earth after Thor's friends have just conveniently arrived. Then we have a big fight scene. Then Thor and Jane kiss, and Thor goes back to Asgard, and then we have like another mini fight scene. But in between that, Thor just goes and Odin is like asleep, and it's just very weird to me. Like they've had like a massive fight scene, and then you have like a smaller one afterwards, and I would have just cut the bigger one, and like to make more drama and effect onto the final fight.
Right.
There's the order of things that happen in this movie. I don't like it.
We haven't touched on Heimdall's role in the movie yet.
Oh, let's. Heimdall. What is his role in this movie?
I mean, so they introduce him as the sort of gatekeeper and all of that. And he's pretty cool. Like, he's well acted. Because obviously Idris Elba is just God. And they introduced the Bifrost really well, I think. We see it in the beginning when they go to, is it Svartalfheim?
Jotunheim.
Jotunheim, sorry. What's Svartalfheim? Is that the elves?
That's the, yes.
Okay. So the Bifrost is introduced. Heimdall is just a really compelling character. And then they set him up well for future movies. He doesn't really have much to do with this one, but it's really weird because Heimdall doesn't have a narrative in any of the movies, and yet we've all really like been drawn to him. So what's the deal?
I mean, he doesn't really have a narrative generally. He's just, part of his character is to be like eternally still. So I suppose that's what it is. It's like that's one character they do get right. But I'm kind of annoyed they missed out on him being Sif's brother.
Yeah.
Because they are siblings and there is no indication of that whatsoever. And I don't even mean in terms of casting. Like, that's fine. I don't care how they've cast it. It's fine. Because, like, you can watch loads of Shakespeare adaptations and they'll have cast, like, you know, you have mixed race siblings. It's fine. But they don't mention it whatsoever.
That's true.
I'm just like... Also, just Asgard society generally is confusing in this movie. Because are they all gods? Or it's implied they are. There is no evidence that they're not all gods in this movie.
Yeah,
but
they
the
just
Asgardians
really world build.
Just more effort in the world building would have been good. Because that makes it confusing for the next movies. Where you're just like, what is happening? Because suddenly we're introduced to all these other people. And we're like, who are you? Don't know. I've not seen you before.
That's fine. We can...
Now that we've torn that to shreds.
Yeah. Should we do a brief little bit on sort of the final fight with Loki before moving on to Iron Man 2?
Okay, I like this bit. But also at the same time, again, crappy camera angles, man.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
So, what is the final fight? Like, what are all the motivations?
Loki does some, like, pole dancer moves. Yeah, that's quite good. That really developed his character for me. I see this as Loki just kind of lashing out quite a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't 2012, so I'm not going to do a whole Loki meta or anything, but...
So I think the fight scene is quite interesting because it takes place on the Bifrost. You do have both characters showing off their powers quite nicely. There's the bit where Mjolnir is put on Loki's chest.
Oh, yeah.
So that's reinforcing the idea that only the way they can lift it. So there's some nice little payoff and setup and whatever. And then there's the bit with Loki creating those many illusions, just like laughing at Thor. So there's a lot of good stuff in this. And it kind of pays off the narrative because obviously Loki and Thor's relationship is interesting. But I don't know, it just doesn't feel all that memorable.
No. To me, it's not. I mean, they are on the Bifrost, so it is as dramatic as they can make it. But I feel like because of the lack of... I'm not even sure who we're supposed to be rooting for either. Like, this movie confuses me in terms of motivations because although I love Thor dearly, it is difficult to see Loki as like... As you definitely want Thor to win. You know? Because of the way they've characterized this movie. Like, there's a lot of people who do say that, you know, Loki really steals the spotlight in the Thor movies. And I think in this movie, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
but
also...
then, like, what are the implications of Thor losing this fight?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
what will happen?
Exactly. That's my point.
Will Loki kill him?
No.
Will Loki take over Asgard?
No, because Odin's fucking awake. I don't understand
They're just
why
having a brotherly spat.
I mean, they are fighting because of, like, Loki is trying to destroy Jotunheim.
Yeah.
That's what happened if Thor loses, but Like, no one really gives a shit about Jotunheim, though.
No.
Do they really? Thor's like,
really
you can't
weird.
destroy an entire planet, and Loki's like, you literally did that like an hour ago in the narrative.
It's really bizarre.
I know people say that Thor has changed, but I don't think you can change that much in 3 days. So for me, the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie are too close together for him to really be on his high horse about this.
Yeah.
And we're given no imperative to care about Jotunheim either.
Yeah.
Or, you know, this is a weird one.
I suppose final thoughts on this movie are Coulson is done quite nicely, that we're tying Thor into the wider MCU as well as we can. It does introduce magic in a grounded way that, whilst disappointing in retrospect, at the time it was incredibly impressive.
Yeah. Again, I'd like to say this movie, in terms of like when I first saw it, I was like, oh my god, this is the greatest movie ever.
Right.
I mean, that's how I feel about every MC movie. Like,
yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah. I don't know. It just kind of exists. But so that was in 2011. Going back a year to 2010, we had Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2 was a rush job because they hadn't planned it. They only did it because Iron Man was so successful.
Yeah, this is what I was going to bring up during Thor, actually, was the fact that, like, I read in an interview that, like, as far back as the first Iron Man movie, they had everything that is happening now planned out. And, you know, you can kind of see that in the first Thor movie, but you can also see it here, in fact, that this is just like a completely just random one-off somewhere else. What is
you can also see it because War Machine is introduced in Iron Man 2, and then he's not in Avengers.
Yes. Yeah, why was he doing Avengers?
The implication is that he's just working for the military, because he never actually becomes a superhero until Iron Man 3.
Yeah, but does he become a superhero in Iron Man 3? No. That's not what that movie's about either.
Yeah. So the whole War Machine thing is really weird.
Yeah, I didn't realise he was actually an Avenger until the second Avengers movie, and then he's not really in that either.
No, he's not.
Oh, are you part of the Avengers? Who are you?
It's very strange. But Iron Man 2, so we see the success of Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark. And obviously, Marvel are like, right, Hulk flopped. Iron Man was wildly successful. Let's go ahead with our plans, but also just throw in an Iron Man 2 in there.
Yeah.
And we see this because, apart from the development of Coulson and the trying to continuously recruit Tony's shield, it's just unconnected. Just more Iron Man.
It's just more of Tony Stark being Tony Stark.
Yeah.
And he just has kind of like a breakdown halfway through that then is not relevant ever again.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, it's an interesting movie because essentially, I don't know how to. I genuinely don't know how to begin. We just watched this movie a few hours ago, and I don't know how to begin with it.
No.
On paper, it's the best Iron Man movie. In practice, it's the worst. And I'm trying to figure out why.
I agree. This movie is confusing on a number of levels because we've picked two very weird ones this week.
Yeah.
This movie, for me, a lot of it just doesn't hit. In the same way that I know a lot of people find that Guardians of the Galaxy 2 doesn't hit for them because it's just a reworking of the same kind of stuff, the same jokes, basically.
Yeah.
And for me, this is kind of the same. I get what they mean by that in this movie, because for me, this doesn't hit.
Right.
Like, it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's like, it's just fine. In the same way that Thor is fine.
Yeah. So
fine.
It has two villains. It's got Whiplash and Justin Hammer.
Oh, yes. Okay, who hasn't seen this in like a decade?
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess it wasn't memorable. Oh yeah, Justin Hammer. Oh, because there's that scene at the start. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are some interesting themes going on here in terms of the US government and the Iron Man technology. That's really interesting. And I was like, oh, it could be a really interesting narrative if they based it. You could have the government as the enemy, and that would be interesting. And then have like Justin Hammer as having some kind of yeah, that would take it too much into Iron Man 3. I'm just thinking about him being linked in with terrorists, but then
see, so this
feels like a halfway point between both movies, and it doesn't work.
The opening of this movie sets its themes up really well, like surprisingly well. So I always used to think it was disappointing that this movie didn't have a subtitle. It was just called Iron Man 2. But I realized upon rewatching it that it works because it is about the successor to Iron Man.
Yes.
So you have the plot of the other military forces trying to create their own Iron Man, which is where we see Justin Hammer come in.
Yeah.
You have the plot of Ivan Vanko developing his own arc reactor to become Whiplash, and he is the second Iron Man because his narrative follows the exact same beats. Because the way they're connected is Anton Vanko and Howard Stark developed the arc reactor together, and then due to reasons, Howard got all the spotlight and Anton was like cast back to Siberia and lost everything and is forgotten by history. So Ivan is upset by that and wants to dethrone Tony. Simple motivation, really effective.
Yes.
And then we see him go on like a little montage in his own version of the cave with a box of scraps, building the arc reactor and his own Whiplash suit. Really, really effective. He is the second Iron Man.
Yeah.
And then you have Rhodey being the War Machine, where he's literally the second Iron Man. So all three of these kind of antagonistic characters are following the same narrative, and you have the potential to have the story be entirely about what happens when a copycat comes along.
See, for me, that happens very much in the first movie as well, if I remember correctly.
So Stain,
Stain has his own kind of suit, and this seems like a furthering of that. But aside from Whiplash, no one seems to go in a completely different direction aside from it being drones. And I feel like they could have made the suits like more unique and more different, and just generally more interesting.
Yeah. And then there's a really interesting scene where, because what they wanted to do with this movie was they wanted to adapt the Demon in a Bottle storyline, which is the most famous Iron Man storyline, and it deals with his anxieties over people coming in and like interfering with his life, leading him to alcoholism. But of course, they didn't want to put alcoholism on screen because this is a kids' film first and foremost. So instead, they went with palladium poisoning.
I really like this storyline of palladium poisoning. I think it's really good. And also, I feel like, you know, the opening sequence where he makes Pepper CEO, that's also really strong in establishing their relationship. But after that, the film for me becomes very forgettable.
Right.
Like, I remember the opening stuff, and then they go to Monaco and he has a new assistant and some stuff happens. Yeah, and then Natasha Romanoff does some shit.
Yeah.
She gets changed in the back of the car.
Set everything up really well. Oh, she gets changed in the back of the car, all right.
Yeah, I remember that.
Crikey.
Of course.
That's really interesting, actually. We're going to talk about the sexualization of Natasha at some point.
I'm saying as I blatantly sexualize her.
Yeah.
Apologies.
So it sets everything up really well, and there's this really effective shot. So they set up Stark Expo, and we start to see the effects of Iron Man being a celebrity and the effects this is having on society and on Tony, which is really, really cool. And there's this great shot of Tony putting a speech on by his father, Howard Stark, and then he goes off stage and tests his palladium levels. And it's really cool because he's looking at how his suit is poisoning him whilst Howard is giving a speech about how it's not the technology that's important, it's the effect that technology has on us that's important.
Yes.
And it's a really, really powerful shot, really, really powerful scene in general, and it sets up the themes of the movie so spectacularly, and then the movie just falls apart.
Okay, so do we want to analyze specific plot points, or do we want to go right in on characters in terms of?
Should we begin with characters?
Yes, I agree.
So you choose.
Okay, I'm going to start with. Oh, let's just start with Natasha, shall we? In terms of shoehorning characters in.
Go on.
Okay, to me, she has no meaning in this movie. She's like supposed to be. Whose assistant is she? Tony's, Pepper's?
She is Pepper's assistant. She is the new Pepper Potts because Pepper is the new CEO.
Right. Okay. Well, we don't see her do that. She seems to be Pepper's assistant, whereas Pepper was Tony's assistant, which is confusing. I mean, Pepper is like, I guess she is in Tony's role now, so that makes sense. But
yeah.
Okay.
I may be incorrect. It's very poorly explained, and she functions as an assistant to the both of them. There we go. It's poorly told.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't get any of that. I'm sorry. Okay. My Wi-Fi just died.
That's fine. I'll restate it. It's poorly explained. She functions as an assistant to both Pepper and Tony within the film. That's a fault of the film, I believe.
Yeah. For me, okay, this is always an issue when characters are swapping between two different people who they're associated with, is unless you can enmesh them firmly with both people, you risk them just kind of floating through the movie, and she does. And then at the end, it's like, oh, she's a superhero. No, she's not. She's just like, what is happening in this end scene? Okay, I mean, okay, it is set up well in terms of like when she flips Happy over, which I think is a really good shot. But Tony's reaction to that annoyed me.
Right.
The sexualization of that scene annoyed me. And then she just continued to annoy me. I mean, that's not her fault. That's the writing's fault.
Yeah. But... So what's interesting is, what I was discussing with Emma when we were watching it, is that she functions as a very nice sort of deconstruction of that trope, that sort of femme fatale.
Yes.
And it's really effective that they're employing all of these things, but it's Tony who is responding to her in this sexual way, whereas we, the audience, are mostly just impressed by her.
Yeah.
And then when it's revealed that she is the Black Widow in the brilliant donut diner scene with Nick Fury,
why are her boobs out?
Yeah, they don't.
I think about that every day of my life.
They give her a butt shot when she walks on scene. Her zipper is never zipped up. And also, there's the bit where she gets changed in the car.
Also, why does Nick Fury have his arm around her?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is going on? I was confused. I was like, are they in a relationship? What's going on here?
She never stops being sexualized.
Yeah, even when we're supposed to see her.
Yeah.
In a super. Okay, so what is interesting here is like when we are supposed to be impressed by her, it is when Tony is sexualizing her, whereas when Tony is impressed by her, it is we, the audience, who via the camera are forced to sexualize her.
Yeah.
Which is not what we want here, guys.
Not at all.
No, I would do the reverse of that.
Yep. So we have a lot of thoughts from Emma in the chat here. This movie is about the past coming back to bite Tony, Whiplash / Hammer, and a dangerous future, Hammer / War Machine. Hammer working both sides makes this way too confusing. Whiplash should be a completely separate villain, and Hammer should just be working with War Machine. There are too many stupid, inconsequential scenes of Ivan Vanko and Hammer bickering like old lovers. They aren't necessary, and they make Vanko out to be a stupid Russian man with little personality except liking bullets. The actor who plays Whiplash is very scary. His name is Mickey Rourke. He has so much to give, and they don't give him enough to work with. However, I think Tony's anxiety / poisoning, his relationship with Pepper, the creation of War Machine, and Natasha's introduction are all pretty great. I think her flipping Happy over makes no sense. Why would she reveal her skills?
Yeah, that is what confused me. Is like I don't understand why she'd even get in the ring with him. Like, to me, we are supposed to believe that she's like this amazing spy. For me, that reveal that she is a spy didn't come out of nowhere. I was not surprised by that. I was like, oh yeah, she flipped Happy over, lol. Remember that? And she's always looking suspicious.
Yeah. Really
I agree.
kind of put telegraphed.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like her being his assistant is also quite. That was a good way to introduce her, I think, as like the mole
she was
Fury.
introduced far better than Clint was.
Although it could have been interesting to have her be like a mole with Hammer or someone else. I wouldn't have if I was Fury, why would you plant her with Tony? I mean, I guess
the idea is there's a deleted scene from the party where she's testing out the Iron Man suit.
Oh yes. Oh,
so to give a bit more detail, when Tony is drunk, he gives her one of the gauntlets and like teaches her how to fire it.
Sorry? There is part of it where she does have it on. That I don't think that's cut.
No, in the final film, she never wears any of the suit.
Why do I remember that bit more than the actual film?
I don't know. I think there's just loads of gifs of it on Tumblr, to be honest.
That's quite a good scene.
And you see
in a disaster of a scene.
Yeah. So that he gives her the gauntlet, she tests it out, and you can kind of click that the reason she's been planted in Stark Industries is so that they can get closer to Tony.
Yeah.
Because at the end, Fury says that Tony hasn't been approved for the Avengers Initiative, but the Iron Man suit has.
Yeah, I feel like keeping that part in, this is why I thought it was in there, is because it really does show that they are like after the Iron Man technology, which feeds into the Avengers film, where they're in the clean energy business and again like stealing sort of tech from Tony, which this would just be so much better if they'd made that clearer.
Yeah.
But within the context of the narrative, like in what we are shown, it doesn't make sense that she's in a mole with Tony. Like, it doesn't really.
Yeah.
Oh, so, what? She's just reporting how ill he is.
Yeah.
You could just literally just look at him.
Exactly. I do like
he's not
the way they show his poisoning. Like visually, he acts it really well. Robert Downey. There's the one scene where he replaces his arc reactor and then you see him get healthy again. The acting is stellar. Like he had nothing to work on, but he showed himself like feeling the biology rework itself, and you believed it, even though he had absolutely nothing to work from. He was just stood there looking at the camera. Yeah.
Also, the scene where he like creates that new element is so good. Oh, it's stunning. I love it. And I love how he destroys his house.
Stark, and and then the planting the Captain America shield is quite nice.
That was nice, yeah. I was happy with that. And Coulson's reaction to that as well.
Yes.
Like, that was one of the best scenes.
One thing that failed Thor and worked really well in Iron Man 2 was the world building.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So Thor had a really good villain, but not good world building. Iron Man 2 had the opposite, which is really peculiar.
Whereas Black Panther had both. That movie is so good. Can't wait to talk about it.
Emma says that the acting in this movie is one of its saving graces because Sam Rockwell, as Justin Hammett, Sam Rockwell literally in every movie.
He's so good.
He never plays the main guy apart from in like Moon or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've heard him be described as like the best unremarkable actor you'll ever see, because like I don't think he's won any awards. He's never been like the lead guy. You never think, oh mate, Sam Rockwell's in a movie, I'm gonna go watch that.
No, but his performance is always really, really high standard. And that is what, I thought he was really convincing to me as Hammer. And for me, Hammer and Killian, who we will be talking about in a couple of weeks, were a little bit too similar. This is my problem with this movie, is like, especially in the wake of Iron Man 3, it's too much half Iron Man 1 and half Iron Man 3, just kind of meshed together with some pre-Avengers kind of shenanigans going on.
Yeah. So
other characters. Who else?
Let's talk a little bit about Whiplash.
Yeah.
Because he is, as I've previously said, he's got his good motivations. Like they are textbook motivations when it comes to a good villain. But they never give him much of a chance to shine because he's working with Hammer a lot, and so there's the bit prior to Monaco where he's building his own exoskeleton, And it's really, really good. You see the parallels, you feel the danger, and then the Monaco fight is incredible because he's got such presence, such danger. And I think it really works because he's wearing a prototype suit and Tony's wearing the suitcase armor, which, first of all, the suitcase armor. Damn, son.
Legendary.
We get 30 seconds of him suiting up.
Oh my
I think
god,
that's
when he picks it up and go, oh,
yeah, I think
so
that's something
good.
that's really missing from future movies is the impact that any new armor has.
Yeah, because he just like suddenly has like 37 suits.
Yeah, and then in Civil War, he's just wearing a new suit, etc., etc. But that's fair because they're not his movies, whatever. But I think that the Monaco fight scene is really interesting because it shows Tony being reckless. It's got really good comedy, I think, such as when Happy drives the car into Whiplash.
Yeah.
They're all yelling at each other, but you're still in this action scene, and it's really funny, but you never lose the tension. And then because they're both wearing prototype suits, we get this feeling that we haven't seen either of them at their full potential, but they're still fighting for their lives. And Mickey Rourke's delivering a great performance. I like that. But then Hammer recruits Whiplash and says, "Yo, can you help me? I'll help you." And that's where it loses it for me because Whiplash feels less menacing.
Yes.
And he starts working less for himself.
Yeah, the idea of him being tied to Hammer in a way that is not Hammer originally funding him, for me, doesn't work because it makes him lose some of his agency as a villain. And Hammer I really do like Hammer as a villain, but it just doesn't work here. Having him suddenly we have like all the iron, whatever they are, hammer drones, whatever those things.
They're jokingly referred to as hammeroids.
Hammeroids.
Yeah, right.
That's funny. And then to me, that fight sequence where War Machine and Iron Man are fighting them is much more memorable to me than anything that happens afterwards with Whiplash. Like, I don't remember, whatever.
So the thing is, with that fight scene, the final fight, so throughout the movie, after the Monaco scene, Hammer recruits Whiplash, and then Whiplash starts to build the drones, and you get this bickering back and forth where it just starts to feel a little less focused. And then Vanko is secretly building his own suit of armor, which nicely mirrors Tony building the Mark I whilst being the prisoner of the terrorist.
Yes.
That's a nice mirror, but it doesn't work in the narrative of this film because it diminishes Vanko's threat because he's not allowed to just work for himself. And then it removes the impact from the final fight because you just have loads of drones, and then Whiplash shows up at the end to kind of continue the fight.
Yeah, after this is like what happens in Thor, where you have like a really big fight, and then you just have like one guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not even, this works so much better in other films where you have the main person fighting the main villain while the rest of the massive fight sequence is going on elsewhere or at the same time, and you cut between them. Whereas having like, suddenly he just appears at the end, like, and not even at the most dramatic moment of the fight sequence with the drones, he just appears at the end and it's like, oh, now there's another guy.
Yeah, and his design isn't that compelling, and also the fight's over within 2 minutes.
Yeah,
maybe even less. It's really well shot. Like, this is my issue. The two fight scenes at the end in the Japanese botanical gardens, really nice set piece, I'll be honest. They're both good, they're well made, but they lose the impact because there are two of them. So the drones fighting them is, if you just go back and watch that like scene, beautiful. There's loads of drones coming in, it's shot really well. There's that awesome comparison between War Machine using bullets and Iron Man using just punches. Then it ends with the dual lasers. It's just a really well-made fight scene. And then Whiplash arrives, and you have another really well-made fight scene, but it doesn't have any of the dramatic stakes.
Yes.
And it's over really quickly. because they do that kind of hand blast explosion thing that they did set up earlier on, which I'm impressed by, but it's just over too quickly. And
if you cut down a lot of this drone fighting,
yeah,
if you cut down that maybe by, I don't know, half the time, it's not necessary. Yeah.
What you said, switching between them, I think it would be interesting. You'd have to rework like some of the plot stuff. But if you had War Machine fighting the drones and then Iron Man fighting Whiplash,
or give Pepper an Iron Man suit, please. Or Black Widow in an Iron Man suit. That would have been a good way to lead into Iron Man being approved, but not Tony Stark.
That's true.
As if she had one of the suits.
We do have some comments here, again from Emma. A theory that would make the end scene so much better. The drones attack people instead of Tony, as Vanko wants to create chaos. Hammer redeems himself by getting control back of the drones instead of Natasha. Then he makes a choice, and instead of depowering them, he sends them after Tony. Then he is taken down by Pepper, legit just calling the police and getting him arrested. That makes what Pepper did much more subtly heroic. And Whiplash is left to have a proper fight with Iron Man and War Machine.
Yes. What? Oh, okay, because for me in this movie, Natasha doesn't save anyone, which is why I struggle to see her as like a fully fledged hero or anything. I mean, she isn't, but let's just pretend. If she's just, I don't know, you get all the build up and then you don't get the payoff with this movie. And I mean, it's fine, but it's not great.
Yeah.
This is my mood for this week, is it's just fine. Everything is fine.
Yeah, really good build up, not enough payoff.
Yeah, especially after Iron Man 1, which was so good.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
So I'm still sort of caught up on Whiplash as a villain, but I want to move more on to War Machine himself. What do you think of the party fight scene where War Machine is introduced?
Just why? Like for me, a lot of this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I understand like Tony is having like a really difficult time and he's dying, and I mean, okay, this does make sense narratively, but him and War Machine just straight up trying to kill each other is baffling to me. And I watch it and I just don't really get it.
Yeah. I think that
I don't think it's necessary. Like I feel like that's not how Rhodey would react.
Yeah. I think that in terms of like, again, the way it was shot, the actual fighting, it's a really cool scene, and the soundtrack to it is really good, and it's a really good way of introducing War Machine in terms of as a viable super person.
Yes.
But he's neither hero nor villain. Because I always think when you're introducing a new person, the best way of doing it is to have them display themselves in some way, and that's why you see a lot of like Civil War, Batman v Superman stuff. Just like introducing a hero, get them to fight the already established hero, etc., etc. Rinse, repeat. It gets a bit stale, but if you do it well, it can feel fresh.
Yeah,
and it shows that War Machine is a cool person to keep an eye on. And it sets up, because he's just wearing the Mark II, and then it sets him up for later on when he's wearing the actual War Machine. And then later on when he becomes a full-on partner to Tony. I think that he, and also Don Cheadle being replacement for Terrence Howard is really well handled at the beginning when he comes into the courtroom. I think Rhodey's just narrative throughout this movie is really strong, to be honest. It works really well as an origin story for him. It's just a shame that it detracts from Tony's story.
I think it's a shame that it is... There's too many introductions of people going on in this movie. So you have Natasha as this is her origin story, and this is War Machine's origin story, and it's also Tony's like continued story.
And Hammer
and Pepper and Tony's relationship, and there's just too much trying to be crammed in that it feels like nothing is really happening of any consequence.
And the biggest shame of all is that, as I say, on paper it works. Like if this was a book,
this would work as a book,
because a book has loads more breathing room.
Yeah, A lot of things that work on paper don't work in films because of the time frame that you have to have in a film. Especially action films, you can't have them going on for like, oh, this takes place over the course of 6 months. No, it has to take place over 6 days and then max a week, and then you have to flash back and forth. If you want to go anywhere
everyone's motivation is connected. All of the themes of the movie are really strong, and the way it's created, the way it's shot is just really strong. It's just a shame that there's so much.
And that for me leaves it feeling very kind of unimpressive.
Yeah.
But then again, I do like Natasha. I like War Machine, but I just they would feel forgettable if they weren't in like the next movies.
Yeah. And I do think it's a shame that we don't see enough of War Machine, because I was rewatching Civil War.
Where is War Machine for like the rest of the MCU until recently? Yeah. Where has he been?
So he wasn't in the Avengers, probably because they didn't plan for him to be. Because I believe Iron Man 2 was an unplanned film.
Yeah.
He was in the end of Age of Ultron and at the party scene, but in the army, he was at the end of Age of Ultron, just coming in to be like, yo, I'm helping to clean things up and make it a bit more believable that the Ultron drones were defeated. In Iron Man 3, he's a really strong character, so that's just fine. And then in Civil War, he's there because he's the expendable character.
I would have killed him in Civil War.
I'm really intrigued to see what they do with him in Infinity War, because I agree I would have killed him in Civil War. However, I also think he deserves more screen time. And in Infinity War, we know that he suits up in a new suit, and he's still got the robotic prosthesis for his legs. So they could do something really interesting with him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things, not to devolve this completely into Infinity War stuff, but there's a lot of interesting stuff that can happen in Infinity War. But I'm completely sold on the fact that this is probably going to be a movie from, I was about to say Ultron, Thanos' perspective, not Ultron, try and forget about him. Because I just don't see any character getting huge amounts of development in this movie. Like, I think probably... I mean, Tony or Cap are definitely on the chopping block.
Yeah.
I am slightly convinced that Thor could be saved, given the success of this movie. Chris Hemsworth has been like, "Oh yeah, I'll do another one."
Yeah. And I think Bucky's going to get a lot in this movie, especially with Steve being on the chopping block.
Yeah, Gamora will get a lot. Sam will get a lot. Nebula will probably get a lot as well.
Now, the thing is that. See, what I want is a War Machine and Falcon buddy cop movie.
Same. What I want, like a movie of what they're doing during Age of Ultron. Just tell me where they were.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we get a bit. So with Sam, when Steve and Sam were talking at the party, Steve's like, "How's the missing persons case?" So that's like a fair explanation for why Sam's off. But the thing is, if you remember in Civil War, when they're all sitting around talking about the Sokovia Accords before the funeral.
Yeah.
You see Sam and James talking for like a few lines.
Yeah, they're clearly pals.
Yeah, they are clearly pals. Because what's also interesting is that they are both in the Air Force.
Yeah, I want a movie of them just hanging out.
Like, the parallels between them are kind of weirdly accurate, weirdly identical, basically. Experienced black dudes in the Air Force with like flying suits. In Civil War, they clearly have like conflicting ideals, because Rhodey is more connected to the military aspect, whereas Sam is more jaded because of A, being a soldier, and B, he lost his wingman. So there's a lot to delve into with their relationship. And I think my biggest gripe is that Civil War was moved forwards. Because
I agree. Yeah, it comes too soon after Age of Ultron for me. And it's very confusing to watch a lot of it, because a lot of it, like, suddenly you have, oh, I mean, I know it is set in the like payoff from Sokovia, but at the same time, you could have delayed this. I'd have put Thor Ragnarok before it.
Yeah.
And maybe Black Panther as well.
And we could have see what I like, and this is as a comic fan, I just like established heroes going around, going on missions.
Yeah.
And I feel that there's a lot of missed opportunity for this, because at the end of Age of Ultron, we see the new Avengers. You see the Falcon, Scarlet Witch, the Vision, and War Machine, and Cap, and Black Widow just teaming up, because like Tony's doing his own thing, Clint's just retired, etc., etc.
Fucking Clint and his farm.
And so we see these new Avengers, and then at the beginning of Civil War, they're on a mission, except War Machine isn't there. Which I guess because it's a Black Ops mission, sure, you don't want a flashy Iron Man guy in there. But
what I would have done with this is I would have had, like, you know, Tony recruiting Spider-Man. I'd have had Spider-Man Homecoming before Civil War, so that then you have Tony coming back into the fold, because it seems like he's just gone and then he's back again.
Yeah.
Because Clint's like, I retire for 5 minutes, but Tony, he left, and then suddenly he's back.
Yeah.
And so if he'd gone and recruited Spider-Man, and like we'd have had all that development first of him like as like a father figure, that would have worked more powerfully for me in Civil War.
Yeah. I think if Civil War had been Avengers 3, then we could have got a lot of interconnected movies just showing the new Avengers being the new Avengers.
Where are my Avengers team?
Honestly, we haven't actually... Think about it. We've had Avengers 1 where they get formed. We've had Avengers 2 where it's implied that they've been going off fighting Hydra for a couple of years.
Sounds fake.
Right? And then we see them do one mission, which is just them fixing a mess that they cleaned up. And then the new Avengers are formed. And then Civil War. We've never had a movie that just shows the Avengers doing their own thing.
What bothers me is that it totally took over Cap's like final solo movie.
Yeah.
And you know, in the same way that people say Thor gets overshadowed by Loki, this movie, Cap, there's just too much going on for it to be a movie about him. And because they obviously had to show the other side, I cannot say that I fully supported Steve in this movie.
No.
So I'm probably Team Iron Man for that.
Sort of bringing it back to War Machine and Iron Man. That we get introduced this really strong character who deserves a lot more, and then we just never see it, which I'm quite disappointed by. And that's why a lot of, like, if you go to anyone and say like, oh, who's your favorite Avenger, no one's going to say War Machine. And yet he's never had a bad scene.
No. Oh my god, that scene in Iron Man 3 where he's like, you breathe fire, is fucking hilarious.
Rhodey is an excellent character that has just never been given the time to shine, and I'm really quite sad about that.
See, again, if we think about who's on the chopping block for Infinity War, if Tony is dead, is War Machine really in a place to be picking that up? Because we've not seen, for me, I've not seen him enough recently.
That's true. That's entirely true.
To be believed by that. So, also Black Widow in this movie, I would like her to have been, you know, more active, I suppose, in more movies. I don't know.
Because like we got to see
a lot, so I was expecting a solo.
In Winter Soldier, we saw Cap and Black Widow just being cool, going on that mission at the beginning.
Yeah.
I would just like to see more of that with various other heroes.
I would have liked to. After Winter Soldier, I'm convinced like a Black Widow solo movie could have worked.
Yeah.
Even if it was like a back in time one.
Although
now I'm not too fond of Scarlett Johansson that I want one, but
that's true.
That's true. So,
yeah. Sort of wrapping this up. What do we think the impact of these movies was on like popular culture?
I mean, Iron Man 2 had no impact, just saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything new, and to me it loses a lot of what made Iron Man 1 so good in terms of like visually. Because visually, Iron Man 1, you have like I think I talked about this last time, but like the aesthetic of it is really cool.
Yeah.
And for me, you only see that partially in the second Iron Man film.
That's true.
It gets kind of lost. Thor, yeah,
It
had an
introduced us
impact
to
on
the
my life.
concept. Oh, it had a lot of impact on your life.
Yeah.
So the Thor movie introduced us to Thor and sold us on the idea. And as much as Thor: The Dark World wasn't a good movie like Iron Man 2, I believe that Thor: The Dark World is what cemented us on Thor. So the Avengers cemented us on Loki, and the world went mad for Loki in the Avengers. But it wasn't until The Dark World where everyone agreed that Asgard was good.
Really? For me, that's Thor 3.
That's
like,
fair.
I don't.
But like, I think Thor 3 wouldn't have worked well
without Thor 2.
Yeah, because Thor 3, we see Asgard be destroyed, and we wouldn't have cared if Thor 2 hadn't been so well realized.
Yeah, I mean, if they'd have set the whole thing on Asgard, that would have been much better, because I still struggled to feel a lot for it.
Yeah. But Thor just gave us the idea of magic.
Yeah, I feel like it was really important to the development of the rest of the MCU. And because, you know, without that, the establishment of aliens and other worlds was important. And that's continued to be important throughout, especially as we've gone further out into the universe. Like, I firmly believe Guardians of the Galaxy couldn't have worked without Thor. So if they'd have done like a casual Avengers movie just with Earth people, and then they tried to do Guardians of the Galaxy, that would have been ridiculous.
Especially with Thor 2 giving us the post-credits scene with the Collector.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Love it. The expansion of it.
Loved it.
Really interesting. Yeah. So Iron Man 2 didn't have much. It just developed us, and it gave us more time to spend with Tony, which is what we need.
Yeah.
So as much as the movie
makes me care about him more.
It didn't really do much for us, but it was just more, which was good.
Question: if we believe that this was Iron Man 2 was kind of, you know, shoehorned in there at the end, does this mean that Black Widow was also shoehorned into the MCU?
That's entirely possible. I'd have to do more research on that.
And now that I'm thinking about it, I could be sold on that. Unless she was supposed to be introduced in Iron Man 2, or what would have been Iron Man 2.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Natasha was well introduced in Avengers.
Yeah.
So it's entirely possible that Natasha wasn't...
Yeah, without having seen Iron Man 2, when I saw the Avengers, I thought Avengers worked as a fine introduction for her.
Yeah. So I've got no idea.
That's a question for Google.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was the sort of... I always thought this live stream was going to be the one that was kind of more confusing, because we're discussing the two films that are sort of like, what's going on? But the next live stream, we're going to be discussing arguably the two most important movies of the MCU ever.
I'm so excited to talk about the Avengers.
The first Avenger it definitely went unloved at the time.
Yeah.
No one was talking about it. It set up so much without the general audience realizing it. And now going back to it, anytime any member of the general audience says, I've watched the first Avenger again, I always ask, and what did you think? And they went, I didn't realize how important it was at the time.
Yeah, 100%.
And then, of course, Avengers Assemble.
Yes. Oh, great movie. Great movie.
The most important movie of the century so far, possibly.
Literally true. It literally is. That movie is groundbreaking.
Genuinely.
In so many ways. I love it so much.
You remember that iconic shot of like it sweeping around the team?
Don't. I cannot. Every time I see that, I literally am like,
6 superheroes on screen at once. Oh wait, in Infinity War we're having 22.
Oh, for fuck's sake. I'm just confused about how Infinity War is going to work, but I'm very excited to see it. So although I'm trying not to be too excited like I was about Age of Ultron, which upset me on a deep level.
Yeah. So, Age of Ultron stream is going to be interesting. So yeah, next
we're going to have a big fight.
Yeah. Next stream is going to be really cool. We're going to talk about the impact of these two films and how they changed everything and introduced us to Captain America, who went unloved in both films, but now is arguably a more important character than Tony Stark.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really interesting. As for the timing of that stream, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen because my next Saturday plans are interesting, but I'll work it out. I'll advertise it. I'll do some tweets. So that'll be all very good.
It may be on a different day in this case.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for joining me once more. And maybe next time we'll actually have James.
Yeah, maybe. James will be alive.
So yeah, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, that is my final thought. Thank you very much for being here. Emma, the only person watching.
Thank you for all of the wonderful comments. The chat will be saved for playback, essentially, is the word I'd use. So if you want to see any of the comments, they will be saved. That's a nice new feature that Google Hangouts has given.
Thank you, Google.
Yeah, so if you want to check out either of us, oh, that's a nice little wave. Hello, Emma. If you want to check out either of us on Twitter, all the links will be in the description. We'll be talking about this more, and any questions we'll respond to. If you would like to be involved in future streams, just hit me up, and I'd love to have you in. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye. I always love this awkward little bit where I click stop broadcast and we just sit here.
We're like, oh, gotta look nice.
Yeah. All right. Bye.